Welcome to the final episode of the Industry Track for Epic. My name is Craig Hansen, also known as Bash Coder Reptiles. Boy, what a conference it's been so far. We are excited to talk to two of the big innovators right now in the Reptile Expo space. That's the All-American Reptile and Plant Expo and the Southeast Reptile Expo. Nick and Laura Sloan founded AARPE, and along with Troy and Lisa Schroeder from Best Dressed Balls. And Laura is joining us here tonight. Also, Bob Vu from Bob's Balls, who founded the Southeast Reptile Expo. Let's bring them on. How are you guys doing?
Hi, thanks for having us.
You bet. Troy was in the lineup to be here, but he got sucked into a vortex of digital unknown. So we're just hoping he's okay. Let me talk. Start to ask by you, Lauren. What made you think to start doing this? What is the part of the Reptile Expo? What made you say, let's do a Reptile Expo?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll give you the shortest answer that I can. Nick, my husband, Nick Sloan with Sloan Reptiles, he's been breeding reptiles of various sorts for 22 years. He's bred a little bit of everything, which is amazing. He's had this passion for starting reptile expos maybe a couple years ago, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago now. And, it kind of started as something small and something that he flirted with a little bit. And when we realized that one of the big shows was not coming back to Denver, he was like, okay, this is my opportunity. My background, I have a little bit of background in startups and kind of stuff that's totally separate, medical field. But so we, and marketing and things like that. So he's like, I think we could do this, we could team up and do this together. And Troy had approached us and, kind of talked to Nick about a reptile expo as well. And Nick was like, that's amazing because I'm thinking of doing one. And Troy was like, I'm kind of thinking of doing one too. So if you need help with anything or, help with your website, let me know. And we knew that we wanted to work together with Troy and Lisa after one conversation with them because they're just the most incredible people.
Awesome.
And so well versed in the industry. And we really wanted to bring a different type of reptile show to the industry and marry that with plants. And something where vendors feel really supported and, having just a good positive reptile expo. So here we are a year later. It was last year, like the end of April last year, that we had our first show in Castle Rock, Colorado. So it's amazing to see the growth that we've had over the year.
Only a year and a half?
A year.
Just a year?
Just a year. From like the day that we created the name All American Reptile Expo to the day where we launched the website. Oh my gosh, it was like mid-February of 2024. So it was a really quick turnaround from the day we opened our website to our first show. It was like 8 or 10 weeks. It was wild, but it was amazing. We've grown a lot.
Yeah, like you have 8 shows now, something like that?
Yeah, our goal is 8 to 10 shows a year. We would cap at 10 shows a year. 4 locations to 5 locations and 2 shows per year. So seasonally, a spring show and a fall show.
Great. Looking forward to your Nashville one coming up. Bob,
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
you went through a similar journey. Something must have triggered you to say, now is my time to start an expo. Was it a hometown thing?
Yeah. Plus, I like to sink a ton of money in things and not see any return for
Okay,
years.
go home.
Welcome to
Yeah.
ball pythons too, right?
Yeah. So we started actually the very similar timing as Troy, Nick, and Lauren. Last January, February, we were kind of discussing what was going to happen in Atlanta if Reptilian Nation were to not come back, which that was the news that we got from them, is that they won't be coming back to Atlanta. And that being my hometown show, honestly, one of my favorite shows. And that's very similar to what happened to All American is, Reptilian Nation not coming back to Colorado, which we already knew was a good market because they had a good show there. So that left like a void, obviously in Colorado and where I am, and so I guess around the same time we all kind of just brainstormed. Except they kind of have like a game plan. They have, Lauren's obviously phenomenal at their marketing, and with Troy and Nick already know the industry because they've been breeders for years. With us, it's just I've been in the industry for years, and I've been lucky and blessed enough to have good friends that want to help. With Chris and Adeline Robinson, I say Chris Billmeyer, for them to help all of our graphics and promotion stuff. Daniel Wages helping all of our website stuff, anything online, and my wife, just everything else. I've just been winging it this whole time, man. People will think I'm like the mastermind behind the show. I have no idea what's going on.
You've assembled a great team, though.
I just have a team. And I'm just good at assembling a good team, I guess.
For you, Lauren, the initial thing was that there was this gap that needed to be filled in your local market. But what made you start to look at other markets, and what specifically makes you go, man, we really need to go to Charlotte, or we really need to go to Nashville?
Yeah. So we realized there was, obviously, like you said, a hole in the industry in Colorado. Like Bob said, very similar startup stories of Reptilian Nation not coming back to those territories. We also realized that there was a hole in the market. We saw a really amazing opportunity to bring in the plant side of things, and that's why it's All American Reptile and Plant. And we get a lot of questions. If we had a dime for every time someone said, like, I don't get it. What's with the plants? And it's a really amazing crossover to blend those two industries together, especially plants. They're so, plant people, houseplant people, they're so well versed in climates and humidity and the fussiness of plants, and that's a really amazing and smooth transition to reptiles. So we saw that hole in the market, and we really wanted to be able to foster that. So when it came to expanding to other locations, we wanted, of course, vendor feedback. Where do vendors feel like there's also holes in the industry, and going to those territories as well, and not just reptile vendors, but plant vendors as well. Making sure that there's not too many shows that are going on in that area for reptile and plant expos. And we've learned lessons with certain territories, some of the smaller shows that are, of course, the bread and butter of the industries, but of the industry in general. But, making sure vendors, there's enough vendors to commute to that location, convention centers work out and things like that. So we had a lot of demand for a big East Coast show. So that was the second location that we branched out to. And kind of almost like that Midwest part, Kansas, we've had a lot of demand for. Tennessee, we've had tremendous demand for.
There's really nothing up there.
Yes. It was these small shows.
No other shows, yeah.
Yeah, which again, I really feel like those small shows are the bread and butter in the industry, and they're such a brilliant way for smaller vendors to get their foot in the door. True. And to get that show experience. But to bring something different to the area was really valuable for vendors who are ready to kind of branch out and do something that's not the NARBC, not the NRBE, not some of the biggest shows in the country, but something that's kind of in the middle where they can still have a lot of vendor support, access to, usually Troy and I over text message, or Nick especially. So, so here we are with expanded all across the country, which is amazing. We feel so grateful that we've had the support to be able to do so.
If you ask any vendors to either of your shows, and I have, they all say those two words, vendor support. It's like a white glove concierge level treatment you guys offer. Bob, what kind of difference has that made to your vendors?
So obviously we don't have the advantage. Lauren and Nick know this all too well. We don't have the advantage that our prices are cheaper. We don't have cheap table prices. We don't give away, free tables or anything like that. We can't afford to. We'll just be honest about that. These venues that we're booking are extremely expensive. We're not looking for the cheapest space possible, stuff like that. We're out there shopping. And again, I've talked to them about pricing. We work very closely with each other. Charlotte, for example, is one of the most expensive cities I've ever heard of as far as venues go, when they're talking to me about their venue pricing. So we don't have that advantage that we can just give away tables at, prices that some of these smaller shows can do. So the what we have to do is go over the top with the service that they're going to get. When they come in. I've been a vendor. I've vended 200 plus shows. I've been vending shows for over 10 years. And so I know what I like and don't like about shows. I know what I hate seeing when I come to a show. I know what type of service I would definitely be excited about. So that's what we try to provide the vendors. You've been to our show, and when you come in, everything is pretty smooth. I try to make it pretty smooth. I don't want when you get there, you have no idea where your tables are, or your tables are missing. I absolutely hate that when I get to a show and my tables are missing. Stuff like that. So we want to make sure all of that is kind of handled on Friday morning before vendors even show up.
We mentioned, this is, of course, when we're talking about this next breed of innovative reptile show, we're not dogging on, all of the entry-level reptile shows that we definitely need to have. And what advice do you both give to breeders who are doing smaller shows and want to up their game and make the cut? To one of the things, there's two things you guys are having to do. You're having to be more selective, and you're having to make sure you got a diversity of species. So how does, for example, a ball python breeder even make the cut these days?
Lauren, I'll let you go first.
Okay. Well, back in my old career, some of the best advice I've ever gotten was make yourself relevant. And it was a very, very cutthroat industry. And that advice I feel like I've taken to my core is, how do I make ourselves relevant in a world, in my last industry where it was so diluted and, so many people doing the same thing. And, how do we make ourselves stand out? And I think being able to, kind of mold to the times and to be able to grow and be receptive to feedback, so what you're doing is right or wrong, is really valuable in the industry. And learn as much as you can. Just be a sponge and be a fly on the wall, and be able to put yourself in uncomfortable positions is really valuable. And a lot of the people, some of the feedback that we get about, as Bob was saying, are more expensive tables for maybe the area. People tell us all the time, I vend 32 shows a year, and I'm like, that's an amazing feat. That's a lot of shows, but maybe vend a couple smaller, or a couple, small shows, and then vend one or two big shows. Get your weekends back with your family, invest in those tables, because you're going to see it instead of 500 to 1,000 people through the door at one show. You're going to get at, Bob's show, at our show, you're going to get 5,000 plus people. Same, NRBC, any of these bigger shows, because their marketing dollars prove it. So investing in shows like that. And, it's hard to be a ball python vendor that's majority of mixed collection. And he's obviously diversified over the years, but Bob, you can probably really speak to that, is how do you, in a sea full of ball python vendors, how do you make yourself stand out? Especially, I feel like so often, there's so many alliances in this industry that are built on trends. And so how do you set yourself apart from that and set the gold standard, as an individual, as a good person, but also as a breeder? And you can probably speak more to that as how you stay successful as a ball python breeder, especially for the new people out there.
Right. So I've been doing ball pythons for 15 years now. We're full-time for almost 10 years. So for when I would text a show promoter to ask for tables, would go a lot easier. They can probably squeeze me in somewhere just to get me there, because I have a big enough following that might come out and see us. So, and again, you got to think about guys like Justin Kabilka or Miguel or Jason Kittinger, stuff like that. So of course we're going to make room for those guys because we know people are driving specifically from out of state or whatever to come see these guys. But if you're not one of these people, how can you be taken more seriously for some of these bigger shows with limited space? So I'm just going to be honest, throw it out there. We're limited to 70,000 square feet. And with 70,000 square feet, and I want X amount for aisle space and stuff like that. And we're only limiting to 30% or less of ball pythons. Anytime I feel like if you got more than 30% of ball pythons, which means every third table you go to is ball pythons, it's too much for your general attendance, and they're just like, great, another ball python table, another ball python table. They get
overstimulated. You see those comments on Facebook that you're just flooded with. Like, people will give you that feedback, like it's a ball python fest, you know, and so you have to maintain that diversity at the expense of your show. It's not personal, you know.
Right. There's probably a wait list of about 50 ball python breeders on our list currently, and I feel bad because a lot of them are my friends. Again, I've been in this industry for so long. I have so many ball python breeding friends. But for a newer breeder, newer vendor, let's just be honest, we don't love ball pythons as much as a species. We're not looking at a ball python, go, man, this thing is so cool because of the species itself. Most of us fall in love with ball pythons because of the diversity of the genetics, what you can do with the genetics, right? Oh, man, I can mix all these colors. But consider under different species. Honestly, if you went on my list and you put on the list that you breed green tree pythons, man, I don't even care if half of your table is green trees, the other half is ball pythons. I'm probably letting you in because I need green tree python breeders. You breed carpet pythons, you breed scrubs, you breed, you know, all of whatever other species that is different stuff you don't see a lot at shows. Again, I do black-headed pythons myself. I just added rosy boas. I have garter snakes. I have quite a few species, but again, I'm a reptile guy, so I kind of just diversify a little bit naturally and just enjoy reptiles. So I think kind of dig down a little bit and see what you actually like reptiles wise. It don't have to be ball pythons, and especially if you have a mixed bag with 3-4 different species, it's a lot easier to get into these shows, especially like even NARBC. You know, if you're going to go sign up right now for Tinley and you say ball pythons, they're just going to throw out your application. They're not adding in more ball python breeders. But if you go on your application and you put on their green tree pythons, you're probably going to get bumped to the top 10 of the list, you know. So it's just the diversity of it all. I'm not telling people to abandon their ball pythons, but also expand a little bit and look at a few other species that are cool, you know.
Absolutely. And again, we love ball pythons. They're great. You know, Nick's that was his, what made him, you know, kind of fall in love really with the industry was that, and what made him really successful in the industry was ball pythons. That generally won't get a lot of people into shows anymore, which is unfortunate. And it's nothing against the vendor, the species. Diversity of species is what will get you into shows. And like Bob said, like even if you had 30% green tree or monitors, or, you know, asserters, whatever, anything else, that'll get you into the shows. that diversity is what really stands out to people for sure.
The truth is, if you look at the percentage of the reptile market that is ball pythons, and then you applied just the sales percentage and you tried to make a show in that percentage, it'd be a terrible show. It would, you know, we have to remember, you guys have two customers. You have the people there with the tables, and you've got the people at the gate, you know, buying tickets to see this. And a lot of those customers don't come in thinking they're going to buy. And then they leave buying. A lot of them will just want to come and see reptiles, right?
Yeah.
So
that's a big majority of our customer base now. Even for people who are like, well, we need more buyers, and I'm like, well, people who don't know reptiles or don't even like reptiles become buyers depending on how you treat them and how you present the show. If you present a swap meet, that's what they think our industry is. If you go in, it's a nice atmosphere, it's a nice venue, that's what they will think of our industry. And maybe they're like, you know what, I'm willing to spend $300-400 on a pet here because these people are serious. This is a serious industry. These guys are spending thousands of dollars on their setups. You know, this is a beautiful venue. So they're going to be more willing to spend money at a better show. This is my opinion. That's why we do what we do. You know, and it definitely shows in the sales. I'm watching vendors make a bunch of money at these shows, but it's every vendor. Your axolotl vendors got to make money. All these other people are making money, and then axolotls and hog noses, and all these things are trending on TikTok. You need those people there. You need those type of breeders there.
Absolutely. Do you what do you guys feel comfortable? I should have checked with you before on this, but what percentage of your income comes from the gate versus what comes from the tables?
What comes from the? I'm sorry,
from the ticket sales versus the tables,
Yeah, I'm all for transparency because I think it helps people understand better. People joke like, "Oh my gosh, the amount of money that you guys make as show promoters." And meanwhile, like we're all kind of exchanging glances like, if you guys only knew. Especially, when, and again, in light of transparency, these venues are $50,000 to $70,000 venues. So our table fees, right? I mean, people are like, "What do you mean? Like that sounds like a concert stadium." Because a lot of times they are, and we're so fortunate to be able to have money, from sponsors and things like that. But table prices generally don't cover the cost of the venues, so we're pulling funds from other pots, and eventually it boils over. This startup, as Bob knows, like it's hard. Like you're funding all of it until you can play a little bit of catch up. But plus, these extensive marketing budgets that we have to brand ourselves until that branding is there, and we also don't want to become complacent and trying to hit different target markets. But we are we are not in this for the money. That's for sure. I wish we were, but we're not. So, and again, these venues most of them are phenomenal to work with, and we feel great. And venue dates are complicated. A lot of times people say like, "Oh my gosh, you picked like the worst date in the world," and some of these venues have 25-year contracts with their show promoters, so it's hard to get your foot in the door too for certain dates. And
so you're not going to get your favorite dates.
Yeah, Bob knows there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that people like can't even, like wrap their heads around. But again, I feel grateful that we can do it. And I feel grateful that we're in a position to be able to be on, as Bob knows, on the ground floor with all the moving parts. But yeah, we're not in this for the money.
So I'll throw these numbers out there. Again, Lauren, thanks for being transparent with it. So on average, our tables are about $200 a piece, right? On average, that's between bulk packages or just single tables and stuff like that. We had about 300 tables. So people were talking about, man, that's 60 grand in tables. That covers our venue and maybe security, right? Because people don't think about it. We have to pay security, which is those guys charge $50 an hour, by the way, for security. Then we have to have a nurse on site or a med tech on site. All these other things that add on, parking for vendors, janitors, power, electricity, internet, all these things that are covering. So yeah, the tables alone doesn't cover our cost of entire venue and staff. And then on top of that, we have 30 grand in advertising. I have to pay, obviously, our artists and our IT guys and all the people that come and help, stuff like that. And then on top of that, now you have just the most miscellaneous amount of things, your banners, all these other things that you don't think are going to cost you a ton. And then a banner is $1,000. And then you order t-shirts, is $6,000 worth of t-shirts. We ordered hoodies last year. It cost $4 grand, just small stuff like that. And it all adds up. And all of a sudden you're in the hole for $120,000 for one show, and so by the end of the show, it's nerve wracking because on Saturday morning at pretty much 10 o'clock, from 10 o'clock to about 2 o'clock determines if you're going to actually make any money on your show.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, because again, we all know Sundays.
Out.
Yeah, Sundays you're not making a ton of money, but that 10 o'clock crowd till about 2 o'clock crowd, and you walk out there and it's empty. That's my biggest nightmare, by the way, is walk out there at 10 o'clock and there's nobody there. We've been lucky, obviously. We've been blessed. We've been the community support and all this stuff where we go out there. There's always a line, so we've been extremely blessed about that. But yeah, we're not swimming in it like people think we are. And I'll be honest right now. I'll throw this out there. I told Daniel this when he asked me how I felt about the show. I can sell during COVID. I can make more money selling ball pythons in 1 week than I can make off of one show with Southeast Reptile Expo. That's just the reality of it.
And thank you. You're right. Like, thank you for the transparency, because people see, like, first thing they see table prices when people are used to getting an end cap for $450, and they're like, this is outrageous. And I'm like, yes, we'll get the people through the door. But yeah, I can, that resonates with me, Bob. Like, I remember, especially for our first show, you're looking at the pre-sale, and we know pre-sale is not, indicative of overall sale, but Troy and I'm an optimist, like, just in my nature. But even as an optimist, I was like, oh my gosh, what if we get, like, all of this money that we spent, and we get 500 people through the door? Like, what if this is it? This is all we have. And
hey, that's what I was thinking about.
And then
Epic.
you see the lines start to form, and you like, that weight kind of falls off your shoulders. But it's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it.
What about 2 weeks? What about 2 weeks before the show, and you look at your pre-sales and it's like 130 tickets?
It's the worst when people are like, hey, like, they, like, especially some of our big vendors, they're like, what's your pre-sale? And I'm like, don't worry about what our pre-sale is, because historically, through any of our shows that we've had, 4 shows, pre-sale is not indicative of where our show is going to be. And a lot of people are learning, there's a fee that there's attached to an online ticket sale, so they want to pay at the door, but yeah, when those texts start coming through of like, what's your pre-sale look like, I just, like, don't worry about it.
So for people that are out there and they're in, they talk about food deserts. So let's say they're in a reptile show desert. What advice do you give them? Should they try a show? It sounds like it's a very capital intensive endeavor.
Depending on your population, I'll throw this out there, is if obviously Troy and Nick have done market research, they're only going into established cities that have a strong reptile presence or a large population. I would not go, I'll personally not ever host a show or expand to a city with less than 1 million people in it. That's why I've been blessed where I'm in Atlanta. There's 6 million in the metro Atlanta. Obviously, Nashville is already very established. There's a ton of shows in Tennessee. Nothing great, nothing huge, right? So you guys are coming in with a big show with an already established strong market. It works. But the disadvantage of coming into a market like that is those people are used to cheap tables. They're used to $90 tables, $80 tables, free tables at some shows. So that becomes difficult. So keep that in mind for these people that are considering doing these shows. And I tell people, do the community a service and give them a real show. Don't go out there and book, a 5,000 square foot building, have 15 vendors and charge someone $20, $10, whatever it is to see 15 vendors. They can go to a pet store for that. If you're going to put on a real show, do it right. Get your sponsors, gather your money, and do a real show. Even if you start out with a 20, 30,000 square foot building with 50 vendors, in my opinion, that's great. You don't have to go massive and get hundreds of vendors. But if you feel, you shouldn't feel comfortable charging anybody to see 10 vendors, in my opinion. If I would go to a show with 10 vendors, I might as well just have gone to a pet store, a good pet store. So yeah, if you're starting this, I would say put all of it into it, go all in, and we'll help you. Obviously, just message any of us. We've both been very blessed when we message all the other show promoters. They've responded and given us tips and advice. So we would definitely pass that on.
Love it. Yeah. Well, thank you both for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you and learning about this aspect of it. I think a lot of people just don't ever get to see behind the curtain as to what it takes, what are the considerations, even by the way, show venues are not known to be easy to work with. Just in general, they're known to have costs here, and everything's a la carte. Well, thank you all for what you're doing. And the whole reptile community owes you a big thanks because you're bringing more people into the hobby, and you're elevating the game, and you're giving us all something to strive for. So thank you very much for joining us for Epic Industry Track, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.